actually going to go live, and I guess we're live now. So,
Yep.
howdy, y'all. This is Kyle Whittington, and I am joined today, for now, by Drago Dimitrov, who I had the pleasure of meeting at the Catholic Answers Conference, who has joined us here today, and the man, the myth, the legend, Atheist Takes from X, formerly known as Twitter. That is, you guys now know as much as I do. So, if you're not familiar with the page, it's pretty humorous. It takes basically the funniest, most cringe stuff that atheists do online and kind of post it up for our humor. And just, I don't know. I guess why don't you try to explain your mission to us a little bit?
Yeah. So I basically take what I find to be, as you said, the funniest, the most humorous, also the least compelling statements or memes from atheists that I find typically on r-atheism or X or atheist memes is another subreddit that I will frequent to pull these memes from. People also submit things to me and I'll give credit. So I just post what I find bad. I think there are some fairly compelling things that some atheists can have to say. I think there's some atheists that I do respect and I find interesting. Nonetheless, I think there are plenty out there who are effectively the village idiots that it's kind of fun to post what they have to say and just say, all right, well, I don't take this seriously because it's pretty pathetic. So I don't have a particular mission besides to make people laugh. But one thing I really try to emphasize, though I need to emphasize a bit more, is I don't do this to make fun of atheism as such, as though you're an absolute moron if you believe it. Um, it's more so to see what are the bad arguments. I have said frequently that if I were to have more time, I would also make a theist takes account where I post like the weirdest, like say fundamentalists. So this
Mhm.
is where I am, and hopefully it brings plenty of laughs.
Yeah. So this is the second time we've done a video like this. First time we did anti-Catholicism, anti-Catholic tweets and whatnot. Now we're doing atheist. In the future, we're going to do like pagan nonsense. And watch out because I do actually intend to do like the worst Catholic tweets of all time because I would be lying if I said that we are immune to the cringe and that everybody who's not us has a monopoly on it, because that is not the case. So anyway, let us get started. So first up, this is a fairly recent one. What would you do if the Christian God were to proven to exist? Me, I would go all God of War.
Man, this one's just so stupid because as I commented under it, I have a strong feeling, or I think I said I'd be willing to bet $10 that the person who posted this is afraid to order pizza over the phone. Because it's a pretty common thing nowadays for people to have this language of or the way they're speaking, they get so socially anxious over all these fairly basic things, and then you'll see posts like this, like, oh yeah, I would just go and try to kill God. Like, no, you wouldn't, buddy.
Yeah, well, and it's like if the Christian God exists, then you wouldn't want to do this, or if you did want to do this, it would just you would lose. Like I was like, I'm going to go up against infinite power. Okay, yeah. So anyway, and I saw somebody like reposted this, and it was saying something along the lines of, I guess one of the original concepts of God of War was supposed to be like he was going to kill like the entire Roman pantheon, and then he was going to be like one of the wise men to go, bring gifts to Jesus Christ. So I don't know. I thought that was kind of interesting. But Drago, do you have anything?
When I see this, it kind of captures, like, for me, the core emotional disposition of like the wounds from the father. Like, really, a lot of atheism, even the most sophisticated linguistic presentation of an argument, boils down to just, I'm really mad at dad, and I don't care what the truth is. I'm just angry at my father, and that's what I see here.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
had another post. This may be a spoiler. I don't know if you're bringing this up, but I had a post recently. I think, I lose track, but I could have sworn I had a post recently where somebody said, even if the Christian God existed, I would hate him. And I'm not saying
Yeah.
that holds for all atheists, but certainly would for this one. And as you said, I mean, there's no chance of winning here. I mean, when we look at the divine attributes, like, good luck. Like, you got nothing, man.
Yeah, yeah. It's like just because I'm also kind of reminded back in like my freshman year in college, and Assassin's Creed was all the rage, and it was something along the lines of I don't know. I was in the I was in the discussion with somebody, and somebody quoted Assassin's Creed at me, and they acted like they that was their mic drop moment, and it was just like it was like part of the Assassin's Creed was, you know, nothing is true, everything is permissible, or something along that line. And I was just like, bro, you just played video games. That's not a real, like, that's not an argument. And you're acting like, oh, I cited a video game, therefore I'm correct. And yeah, anyway, that was kind of what that reminds me of. And on that note, we have a seminarian, I believe. Hello?
No, not a seminarian. Sorry.
Oh, dang it. Well, okay. All right. Well,
No,
enough of that.
a
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. So
I do study at a seminary with a bunch of others, with a bunch of seminarians, so it makes sense that you would make that mistake. But no, I'm just a lay student.
okay, so David, right? Is that am I pronouncing that right?
Davide.
Davide. So no,
Yes.
I was not pronouncing it. Okay, there we go.
That's okay.
So-
Once again, you are not the first to make that mistake.
Yeah, well, because it's just like I would assume if I see. Well, I guess I suppose if it was David, there wouldn't be an e at the end. So, but anyway,
David tends to be the more Hispanic pronunciation, and I'm Italian, so.
okay. Well, welcome. Well, so thankfully we got somebody who's actually educated and not just shooting from the hip here. So here we go. So, how to write holy texts. 1, write a crazy horror story and add magic. 2, make it sound like God dictated it. 3, threaten people with eternal damnation if they don't believe it. And 4, number your sentences. Who wants to take this one first?
There's a lot here. So, I mean, first off, write a crazy horror story. I don't know how anything's a horror story. I mean, not anything, but I don't know how the scriptures or anything you see in the church fathers is primarily seen as horror. I mean, there are elements of villains there, but like, it's not horror. Second, make it sound like God dictated it. I mean, I guess that's fair. 3, threaten people with eternal damnation if they don't believe it. I mean, it's not simply a threat on the basis of, oh, if you don't believe it, you know, God will arbitrarily do something to you. It's the basis of the fact, or it's on the basis of the fact that you're a wicked person, and this is actually the way of salvation. And so it's not a matter of the fact you don't believe it alone is what's condemning you. 4th, number your sentences. Yeah, that's just a misunderstanding. I mean, it wasn't in like the 16th century when verse numberings came along, something like that. There's much more to say, but
I was
those are
just
my
going to
first
bring that up, that the numbering, the verses and chapters weren't added to the scriptures until centuries later.
Yeah. Well, because like wasn't in like the original manuscripts, there weren't even like spaces, let alone like numbering, right? There was no punctuation, correct?
I'm honestly not sure.
I don't know about that.
Okay, I might be talking out my butt there, but anyway,
That sounds familiar. Yeah.
so
For me, go ahead.
Okay, so I just love how it says, like, you know, make it sound like God dictated it, because like I don't know about you, but you know that there are parts of the Bible that definitely like sound very like divine, but that there are some parts of the Bible that are so freaking mundane and like hard to get through, and it's just like I don't think that you can like read scripture and think like, you know, oh, every single word of this is just obviously like sounds like God dictated it, you know. And I also think it's funny that they make it sound like this is just an easy thing to do. Like, you know, just write something that sounds like God made it. Oh yeah, I'll just do that.
yeah. Well,
That's a
I mean,
great point, yeah.
arguably you could say that somebody like Joseph Smith attempted to do that, but I mean, a Mormon can threaten me with eternal damnation all they want, and it's just like, okay, yeah, but if your text isn't true, the threat carries no weight. So
Right.
what do you want?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
Drago, do you
I
have something?
think. Oh, sorry, go on, Drago.
Yeah, well, no, that's a pretty interesting observation, right? How would I even write like God, right? Even that's a presumptuous thing, as if that were like a clearly defined thing. Other than the Lord split the heavens and said. But to me, I think what this does is it, even starting with part 1, it has us think past the sale. It assumes that there exists reality, and then people sit down and start writing stories. but the whole point is the reality itself has God in it, whereas this just assumes that God is a extra layer that is made up on top of base reality. And so the whole kind of experiment is set up with the false premise.
All right, Atheist Takes, you had something.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say that when you remind me how to pronounce your name. Is it Davide? I can't. I'm sorry.
Davide, yeah.
Can we use the
Okay, I
fingers?
got it right.
Davide.
Davide.
Sure, if that helps you, you know.
Yeah, I'll do it. Well, you made a good point there, where there are plenty of texts in the scriptures that are like, this doesn't like feel immediately as though God was God is saying this, like much of Esther. I mean, regardless of the whole question of additions and apocryphal stuff, but like at very least, very much of it is just like doesn't even mention God. It's just kind of like, oh, fairly common stuff. And then if you read like the various books of Kings and Chronicles, it's oftentimes just this happens, then this happens, then this happens, then this happens, or it doesn't feel like this very epic, expansive thing that you require a deity to write in the first place. So it's a pretty foolish understanding the way Scripture's written.
Yeah. Well, I will add this about Esther, because the other day I was thinking about, proto-canon Esther doesn't have a single reference to the divine in it. But there are some like rabbinic traditions that hold Esther as one of the holiest books of scripture because it's, since God is so saturated throughout it, it doesn't need to be mentioned. So, anyway, I just wanted to add that little bit in there, just to show off how smart I am.
Don't disagree or anything like that. One of the main reasons, of course, it's understood is because it shows God's providence in the world and how the lineage of Christ. But it's an assumption, of course, that the person, like, you have to actively be speaking as though it's from God, like these really high expansive language, whereas a Christian can read the text and recognize God there even when not explicitly mentioned.
Yeah.
Kyle, you said this was a family-friendly program, so I'm not going to share the insight, but there are certain verses which are pretty graphic in nature, which even then, as a Christian, you would scratch your head as like, is this specific part really inspired? Is that actually God or the human's imagination talking here? But anyway, I'm not gonna share those there.
Yeah. Well, I think so far our faiths are thoroughly shook, and we are well into coping. So steel yourselves, and as we move on to this next one, brace yourselves, because here it comes. I'm just here to remind everyone that there's no archaeological evidence for Jesus having ever existed. None. Pack it up, boys. It's time to go home.
Yeah, I'm leaving the stream, guys. Thanks for having me. Atheist Takes is now an unironic page.
No, so I guess for here, like, I would just go the Shroud of Turin, like, seems to be archaeological evidence to me. But also, like, the presupposition seems to be loaded in here that archaeological evidence is the only relevant evidence, and it's just kind of like witness testimony is completely worthless. And this is a position that, like, even no atheist scholars, like, I've never heard an atheist scholar say this is only something that only an internet atheist could possibly find compelling. So I don't know if anybody has anything on this.
Yeah, just the same.
I would just say that. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Go on, Dibby Day.
No, you go.
All right. So I don't have way too much to add on that front, but to simply say that archaeological evidence is the basis for all of this is foolish, because I mean there are so many things we know happened that we don't have archaeological evidence for.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have to imagine that this person is essentially defining as archaeological evidence like a skeleton that we find of Jesus. And of course, we're not going to find like Jesus' skeleton because he ascended into heaven, body and soul. But, we have like the documents and things that we have from the 2nd and 3rd centuries, like that is archaeological evidence, like manuscripts and fragments of writings of people mentioning Jesus. That is a part of the archaeological record. And if you're going to take such a strict view of like what does and does not count as archaeological evidence, then you got to rule out Julius Caesar too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. I mean, what does it mean to have archaeological evidence for a person? And as you said, most directly, it's, well, here's the bones, here's a mummy. Like, okay, but short of actually presenting the physical person themselves, you're just talking about objects that the person may have interacted with. Like, here's some sandals, here's a house. I mean, it's not even clear what threshold the Bruja with the cat emoji is requesting.
Yeah. All right. Well, cool. That was a pretty easy one. So that's one of those ones. That's a head scratcher of like, I'm sorry. Did you think that was going to be compelling? Like,
it's one thing to claim that like Jesus never performed any miracles or that those were later accretions. It's another thing to try to claim that Jesus never existed at all. That's something that no scholar takes.
Right.
Yeah. Well, so if strict evidence isn't convincing, then perhaps maybe a theological inconsistency. Hey, Christians, did you know the first one to ever tell a lie was your God in Genesis 2:17? But of the tree of knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. Obviously, that wasn't true. I'll let the theologians take this one. I think it means you, Davide.
Oh, okay. Sorry. You said theologians plural, and so I didn't know if that meant me or someone else in the stream. So I would say that like this is it depends on exactly how you read it. You have to remember the fact that Genesis was not written in English. And so like what I believe it's saying here is that if you eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that on that day you will receive the surety of death. Basically, death becomes inevitable on the day that you eat of it, not literally you will die on the day that you eat of it. Not to mention the fact that Genesis, just generally speaking, is written in a more poetic and more mythic way, where not every single word of Genesis is taken strictly literally. Genesis has always been understood by the church as being not necessarily a literal accounting of exactly how things went down, but is intended to teach sort of broader truths that God wanted to communicate to us through this particular scripture.
Yeah.
Very good.
What does it mean to live? What does it mean to die? In the Christian framework, it's more than just a biological reality. And in fact, we focus on the spiritual. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Anybody else have anything?
I got nothing else. Well summarized.
Sweet. Well done. Okay. So, maybe perhaps a philosophical question then might be a little bit more hard to handle, because I don't know. Personally, I'll always try to walk through Aquinas's 5 ways with somebody, or at least the argument from motion, or just something like that. But I think it's just kind of a nice parlor trick, because you can almost write down their response, put it in your back pocket before you even start, and just pull it out and like, yeah, okay, that means that you didn't understand. So basically, Tom over there is theists, and he's holding the shotgun. A creation needs a creator, and the universe is created by God. But then it turns right around and is like, well, so who created God then? And I don't know. My take on this is basically like, you didn't understand the argument. Perhaps I didn't communicate it well enough. So I'll let you guys take it from here.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, what's funny is even the meme doesn't actually entail this. It just says a creation needs a creator and the universe is created by God. Like, where in there does it say God is created in the first place, right? But as to the character of actual historic arguments, I mean, the arguments that are generally, I'm not going to say like all sound arguments, but ones that are actually like debated generally historically as cosmological arguments are all going to avoid this. Aquinas' 5 ways, of course, at least the first way, motion. The conclusion, of course, is God has no passive potencies, and so he is exempt from this in some way. With the Deante et Essentia, God's essence is identical to his existence. With Scotus's triple primacy argument, God is the first efficient cause, and all of these things. This is just a basic misunderstanding, and it's really stupid.
Yeah, because I feel like the alternative here is that it would just be turtles all the way down. So, and it's just like, I don't know.
I find that's
Yeah.
one of the things I find frustrating is even with the more philosophically advanced atheists, what I'll find is they'll all the time talk about like having fewer ontological commitments and all these things, and then we're like, all right, well, how about we go through causality? They're just totally willing to posit infinity. Like if you talk about divine simplicity, there's some like, oh, what about gunk theory, where it's like, tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of parts that are forming composites that at the end of the day, like you're just positing a massive quantity of things. But same with like, I'm not a fan of the Kalam cosmological argument or fine tuning, really. Like, I don't think they're the best arguments, is my point. Not that they're unsound. But when it comes to fine tuning, to go from like, how about there's just like an infinite quantity of universes? I mean, that's a pretty massive commitment.
Yeah. Yeah. Drago?
Yeah, well, I agree. I mean, aesthetically, the meme fails to even convey the critique it's apparently setting out to do, as you pointed out. And yeah, I mean, I understand we can't concretely internalize and visualize what an uncreated being that has always existed. But at the same, like you said, we can't really conceptualize infinite regress either. But if you take that proposition as God equals uncreated, I mean, it's not that hard to understand that 2 + 2 = 4. So I really don't understand the objection.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was pretty much just going to concur with what was said. I think that meme actually also just kind of illustrates the problem that the arguments from motion and contingency are designed to illustrate, which is the fact that a creation needs a creator. And so saying, like, let's say that God was a creature in time and space, then he would need something to account for his existence. And that's exactly the claim that we make about the universe. The difference is that, like, again, like God is not a creature in time and space. He is existence itself in his essence, as was said.
Yeah. All right. Sorry, I'm trying to get the next one loaded up and ready so that way we can pull it up. So that's why I'm not terribly engaging here. But here we go. God is the villain in the book of Job, which that's kind of one of those, like, I think you should read it, especially the end of it, to understand it. And yeah, anyway,
this is a big account. That's interesting. This is like a high-profile account that's not necessarily an atheist polemicist by any means, this Martyr Made account. So that's interesting he would write this.
Oh yeah, now I recognize who that is. I mean, he's certainly not a Christian, but yeah. So I don't know. Why don't you unpack that a little bit for us?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose at a basic analysis, I mean, Job is suffering, and God subjects Job to the testing, which me no likey, right? I mean, we can consider the villain, even though, of course, at the end of the day, Job ends up being better off having passed through the fire. Yeah, let me think about that for a moment. But yeah, it's just a superficial analysis of what villain is, and that any suffering must be bad. You're a bad guy if you make me suffer.
Yeah. Davide, you look like you're looking up a book or something.
Yeah, I was pulling out my Bible because some of my favorite verses in Scripture are actually when God finally responds back to Job, and he basically asks him, like, where were you when the seas were made and the mountains were raised? Surely you were there and can tell me. Because Job is basically just saying, like, I haven't done anything wrong. Why is God punishing me? And I think that it's kind of important to remember that, like, the prevailing view at that time was that it was sort of like this Puritan notion of, like, God bestowing blessings on the people he likes. And so it was almost this, like, karmic view where if something bad happens to you, it's because God's mad at you. It's because you've done something wrong. And so Job is genuinely just so baffled as to why everything is going wrong in his life, even though he genuinely hasn't done anything wrong. And then God comes in and corrects him and says, like, listen, like, I know more than you. I know better than you. Like, you just have to trust me, essentially. And I would also point out the fact that, like, again, if you think that God is the villain here, you clearly haven't read the book, because it's not God inflicting these misfortunes on Job, it's Satan that's inflicting them. And you could say, oh, well, God is the villain because he should prevent it. But then that misses the entire point, where it's just like, God knows what is best for us in the end. And he knows how best to guide us in the way of what is right and what we need in that time.
All right. Well, so far, everything here has been fairly substantive and I think fairly edifying for the audience. So let's stop that and get into the more silly nonsense. Let's get into the silly nonsense of these where, they start maybe saying the quiet part out loud. So, this is the official, and you know what? We're just going to add somebody else into the chaos here. So, hi, Danny.
Yo, what's up?
So, okay, so welcome to the tier list. So, official non-negotiable religions tier list. So, it seems that they believe that Satanism is the only true one, with atheism is respectable, with basically all the major world religions as bad, and then Christianity is terrible. So this is clearly, I don't know, whenever I read this, it's just like, oh, well, I'm proud of you for putting this together. Anyway, how was the 8th grade, buddy? Because this seems to be just like, I'm trying to be edgy with like no real substance.
If I could play devil's advocate for just a moment here, I will point out that Satanism is kind of true, at least. Like, it's not good, but, the things they believe in do actually exist, at least if they're like a true believing Satanist.
Sure, but I mean, I suppose the same thing could be said of a lot of world religions. There's certainly a lot of truth in all world religions, or else they'd be completely just unbelievable.
Yeah, I feel like the bottom line for atheism is that like they just the bottom line for Satanism is that they hate God, right? So I made a comment earlier, like how far in atheism are you going to go until you like realize that you're a Satanist or something? Because a lot of these atheists aren't just like, oh, I believe in nothing. No, a lot of them just like, oh, I hate God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What I do like about this one is it does seem to fairly rank the adjacency, like the spectrum of religions. Although the big bucket of bad, it's like he kind of got lazy because he didn't really rank, whether Judaism is better than Taoism, and but so that got a little lazy in the giant category. But the point is, if we agree that the opposing poles are my will be done or God's will be done, with Satanism being a complete embrace of my will be done, and then Christianity being God's will be done with the correct God, Jesus Christ, Trinity. And then all the other stuff are kind of along that spectrum of my will be done versus God's will be done. So I think that part's fair. He just flipped it, the wrong way. But
yeah,
it's true.
One thing too that like, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I mean, I've met these kinds of people in my own life, and I just have to say they're honestly some of the biggest like losers that I've met. And I'm not just trying to be mean here. I'm just trying to say like what's genuinely honest, where you actually talk with them about their understanding of like matters of the faith and of religion and all this, and they genuinely have a very, very poor understanding. At the end of the day, it's effectively, well, unless I get what I want, then the religion is bad.
Yeah. Well, and like, if you believe that Satanism is the pinnacle of truth, I mean, literally, your guy is a loser. Like, Satan's been defeated, so it does kind of make sense that like that would be kind of reflected in the followers a little bit, right? But I was going to add too that I am very happy to see, because I actually do get a little annoyed whenever people say that all religions are equal, because it's just like, well, there's only one way that all religions could be equal, and that's they could be all equally false. But it's like here you're being, at least there's some ranking here. And I'm happy to be in the religion that the Satanists hate the most.
It's true.
Yeah, generally, if you call yourself, if your biggest ally is Satan, I'd rather be, the one you hate the most.
Yeah. So, all right.
Like people are calling God the bad guy in Job, but now this guy is straight up siding with the one that actually inflicted all of the harm on Job. So
Right. So this one's just kind of fun because, as we know, Reddit is the most fair free speech platform in the world. This is where you find only the most intelligent minds. Everybody's an independent thinker. There is no groupthink going on. So, in Ask Reddit, what's something that's not a cult but feels like a cult? And then Islam with negative 357 points, or karma, whatever, and Christianity with 683 upvotes. So, yeah. It's like, I wonder what the difference is between those two things.
Yeah, Reddit, man, bad feelings come up. Reddit.
How old were you when you got off Reddit?
Yeah, it's been ages, man. I will say the other thing, for a business reason, I posted something and people would just dive into. Oh, you know what it was? It was about, I asked about AI generated music or something, and people said, "You terrible person, you shouldn't AI generate music because that's bad for the artist." 20 downvotes. It's like, what? Anyway, sorry, I know that's not the main thing, but it's just like people just can't think on Reddit.
Yeah. Well, and one thing that I think is really deceptive about Reddit, and well, just I suppose this is any platform where somebody can just, not share their name, never show their real face. Atheist takes. No.
I was about to say, you're calling me out.
But here we can hear your voice. We can tell clearly that you're an adult. On Reddit, it's just text, a username, no profile picture, whatever. It's easy to assume that everybody that you're interacting with there is a reasonable adult. Meanwhile, chances are they're like teenagers, 14, or they're either teenagers or they're into teenagers, and it's just like
No, that's
yeah. Kyle's coming out here with the gloves off. But yeah, it's easy to think that it's like, oh, these are reasonable people, but clearly, oh, you can't talk bad about Islam, but Christianity is just like, I saw somebody call it the other day. It's like, if you beat up on Christianity, you can call it that's safe edgy. You can be edgy and you can be offensive, but in a way that's really safe, and you're not going to get canceled for.
sure.
But I do think it's kind of interesting though that the Islam answer is the one that has the most awards on it, so it's kind of funny.
I've been
That is
thinking
actually
about this
funny.
one for a while, because people think of Christianity as a cult because it follows one messianic leader or whatever, because people find this random guy who gives up his everything and oh, follow me and stuff, and then they relate that back to Jesus. And they're like, oh, he's kind of like that, when these new guys are just trying to be like Jesus. It's so backwards thinking.
Yeah. So with a cult, usually the cult leader and the cult's homies, let's say, they get all these, they get riches, they get, wives, let's say family friendly, all these benefits. You see it with every single cult. But with Christianity, what happens to the core followers, right? I mean, martyrdom, brutal death. So hardly a cult.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to let you guys maybe comment on that just a little bit more while I get the next one loaded and ready for screen share.
Well, I have
Also,
a question for you guys then. Do you think Luce is the evangelistic tool for Reddit? Is that how we'll save the Redditors?
am I
Save
not
the Redditors
online
with
enough? What
Molly.
is Luce? I don't understand.
Oh, you don't want to know.
Don't you live in Rome?
No, I'm kidding.
I do, yeah.
Yeah, you should know out of anybody.
Oh wait, are you talking about that little mascot dude that they came out with after the Synod?
Oh,
Oh
I thought it was
yeah,
Luce.
okay. I was talking about that with some of my friends at the Angelicum because everybody's laughing about it, and I'm just
I think it's
I did
awesome,
not
dude.
have the official Catholic Church Funko Pop on my 2024 bingo card. Right?
I think that's a
So-
good point. If we make this a collector's item,
like a
I think
Tokyo
Redditors might buy it.
Dude, 100%. Like, I have friends in the Vatican. I've already asked them, hey, if I buy one of these, can you get it signed by Pope Francis? And they said no. So,
It's the part of the
Dude.
new wave of evangelization, man. So awesome.
Man, I just gotta say though that I think that Luce is just like the embodiment of Vatican incompetence, because they come out with this mascot, this cute little figurine. It gains instant international recognition, and they don't even have 100,000 units ready to ship. So
You had me in the first laugh. I was not gonna lie, dude.
that's just Italian efficiency for you. That is how everything runs over here.
I actually made that comment too. This is what happens when you put Italians in charge of things. So.
Yeah, okay,
It's very
okay,
true.
right.
It's very true.
So, all right. So I got the next one locked and ready to go here. So it's a little wordy, but basically, California sues Catholic hospital for denying emergency abortion. You can read the rest of it if you want. So Reddit does Reddit things. It says, good. The Catholic Church should be required to sell all their hospitals. Religion and medicine do not mix. And then the second reply to that is, religion and society don't really mix, unfortunately. Religion and people, sure, have at it. Society, nope.
We
So
really live in a society.
yeah, we live in a society.
So true.
I think the biggest thing that often goes mixed by this, and actually this might be spoiling something a little bit, but like the Catholic Church started the hospital system. Like that you wouldn't have medicine without religion. So if you're saying like, oh, it doesn't do this, and I was talking to a friend of mine about this once, and he's a militant atheist, and I was saying like, well, the church shouldn't be involved in this. Well, the church started it, and he goes, well, the church shouldn't have started it, and I was just like,
Wow.
like, what do you mean? He's like, well, then who should have started it? I don't know, but if somebody other than the church should have started it, it's like, well, they didn't. So what do you want? So-
Even to this day, like the Catholic Church is the largest provider of non-governmental healthcare and education in the world, and it's not even close.
I mean, and as you said, like that, well, you said this implicitly. I mean, it's a no-win scenario in the case of your friend. Like, if you have a bunch of sick people outside and then the Catholic Church or any church for that matter doesn't help them, be like, oh, look, they're doing nothing, you know? We should be
Right.
taxing them. They're just keeping it. And then if they actually build it, oh, we got to keep religion out of healthcare. So there's like nothing that we could do to satisfy them at all.
Yeah. Drago, do you have something?
No, I mean, I guess sure. Yeah, the people, the society. What's a society that's not with people? Religion. I mean, people. That's a word that traumatizes people. But intrinsic human dignity in the understanding of what it means to be a human in person. I mean, that's what the Catholic Church gave you. Thank you very much, and pretty essential to all those things for taking care of others. Yeah. It's just sad to see the anger and combined with low IQ, low IQ anger, and probably in a lot of trauma for these people too, but they just can't. Anyway, yeah, it's discouraging for them, but oh well.
Yeah, so this I was kind of alluding to this one. It's like Catholics invented the hospital system, so religion owns the place. Source!
Source has me dead, dude. That's crazy.
Isn't that effectively just
Dude is
common
sitting
knowledge?
on a throne right now.
Yeah. It's
Like, this isn't controversial. Like, this is just known. Like, even among like secular like historians and everything, this is just like, oh yeah, Christians started hospitals, duh.
yeah.
Christians invented the scientific method too.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then the double speak of healthcare, right? You're using a word that's a concept where it doesn't apply.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's like seriously, like you take away Christian ethics, it's like, why should I take care of the sick and dying? Why shouldn't I just, mercy kill them and, keep all the resources for myself? So
Yeah.
But yeah. So
It
anyway.
reminds me of this quote from Venerable Archbishop Fulton Sheen, where he said, "Atheism is not a belief, but a cry of wrath."
Mm.
I haven't heard that
Yeah.
one before. That's interesting.
Yeah. All right. So
Dang.
since the election is next week, and I encourage all of our American viewers to go vote, and that's about as political as I'm going to get until I pull this up. So anyway, I'm a better Christian than any Trump supporter, and I'm an atheist.
That's just a word salad, man.
I'm a better square, even though I'm a circle.
Yeah, exactly.
Like-
No, that's what's really important is they effectively want to separate Christianity from the beliefs of Christianity, which is just moronic. And on top of that, this is what I was asking. I'm not trying to get political here either, but it's just a matter of they act like it's like just taking Christian ethics and comparing Trump to Kamala, who are, I mean, you could talk about voting third party, but for now, let's just grant the two-party system as the only option. I mean, are you really going to say Kamala is better for Christians in terms of ethics, like with promotion of abortion and a bunch of other things like that? I mean, not really. Like, this is just straight a lesser of two evils, if you want to say so. Like, that's at best they can give us, unless they want to say, oh yeah, go vote like Constitution Party or something, which they would say is wrong too, because you're not really helping anybody.
And is the atheist saying that, like, do they have morals now? Like, this looks like they have like a moral high ground. So do they believe in morals? And so, like, where do those morals come from? Of course, it's kind of strange. It's kind of funny.
I mean, honestly, I've met very few atheists in real life that are not moral realists. Like, I don't think that atheism can sustain moral realism, but like most atheists I've spoken to in person, like insist on like I can square that circle somehow.
Yeah. Do you guys have more respect for the moral realist atheists, like the secular humanists, or the subjectivists? Because, yeah, what do you think?
For me, it's probably the moral realist, because I think they actually recognize a key feature of reality. And at the very least, what they're trying to do is, well, they recognize that virtue is a real thing. They don't just basically reject every obvious aspect of reality to deny God. And I do think that there are some forms of morality. Like, I think you can make a strong argument that off the basis of virtue ethics, you're going to have some kind of like, you should have God in some way, whether you want to combine it with a kind of like divine conceptualism or something. That's a choice. But I think I have more respect for them, for somebody who's like, oh, I'm an atheistic Platonist, which those people exist, more than somebody who's just like, yeah, morals don't exist at all. Also, I'm better than you.
Yeah, they're very close to agnostics. Like they're like a step away. They just need to call themselves that.
Yeah.
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 Me personally, I actually have more respect intellectually for atheists that take the full nihilist position and actually say, yeah, no, morality doesn't actually exist. It's just a thing that we made up to help us survive and reproduce better. That's all it is. Because like when I was trying to become an atheist when I was in college, like that's the position that I found really appealing. And I was always surprised that like none of the atheists I would talk to felt comfortable with taking that step. And it's just like, well, I that doesn't feel right to me. And I was just like, since when did feelings become a valid argument? It's true or it's not, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that I need to be careful with my word choice because we're on YouTube. But, at the same time, Jean-Paul Sartre dealt with the problem of self-deletion. And, if other people are hell, and it seems that self-deletion is the way to go on all these things. So that does seem to be the logical conclusion of nihilism. So if you meet somebody who is logically consistent but they're still walking around, then clearly they're not being logically consistent. I don't know if y'all have thoughts on that.
It depends on how much they're enjoying their life, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. All right, so I got another one, and I got to say though, this is the most respectable version of this that I have seen, because they've actually labeled the axes, but Europe had a dark age, and it was incredibly dark. So I will say that this is the only one that I've seen that actually measures scientific progress in some way, and that it's the number of notable people of science by century in select European countries. So, and that's actually labeled here on what is that, the y-axis, and then down here you've got, 7th century, 8, hold on, 7, 6, 5, 4, BC, etc. going on. Now, the hilarious thing is that the pinnacle here seems to be the 4th century BC, and that's whenever the decline starts. So the decline continues and bottoms out until the 6th century AD, until like it explodes starting at the 8th century. So I don't know if you could say that religion was the problem here. I don't know. Some of you may be a little bit more historically learned than me.
I mean, just granting probably some of the most important theologians who ever lived were like, 11th through 3rd. Well, or I guess you could say early 14th. I mean, there were more that were very important, but like obviously you have figures like Aquinas and so on that are in the 13th century. I mean, it's kind of weird to be using this. At the same time, I'm going to make a really base take, which is that I don't really care. I mean, the question is, how are we defining science? Because theology is the highest of the sciences. So
I don't even understand the point of this chart. What's the connection to an argument against God with this?
Yeah, like unless they're gonna claim that like society became significantly less religious in like the 10th century, like I really don't understand how he's going to blame religion for this. Like especially if you look at from the 10th to the 14th century, that's like the high point of like religious studies and theological inquiry and investigation, and it's all sort of wrapped up into the Catholic University that investigated all of the sciences, which, as you said, they understood theology as the queen of the sciences,
Yeah, and Christendom too, right? I mean, but anyway, I gotta hop out of the arena. Thanks for having me on, folks. This has been fun. Kyle, thanks for organizing.
Drago, before you go, why don't you tell everybody what you've got going on?
Oh, I appreciate it. Yeah, we're working on holy habits. So if you're serious about growing in holiness and you want technology to help you in that, download Holy Habits.
Where can they find that?
Apple and Android.
Let's go. I love the Android love, man.
Holy Habits. All right.
Download that.
Drago, thank you so much for joining. Have a good night. God bless. And I think we might have somebody else trying to join now. And I don't know if he's going to be coming on here, but so I don't know. Lex, get in here if you're watching. Yes, I'm inviting you. Goodness gracious. All right, so we'll get started on the next one. So meet Abraham, the father of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, because a person who would murder their child because a voice told them to is someone the whole world should admire and follow. I've had conversations with this about this topic on this channel before, so I will let somebody else start us off.
I think one thing just immediately to note is that, and this is something that is obviously obscured today. I think a lot of people have the idea of God speaking to somebody as this just this internal voice that, kind of like schizophrenia, whereas back then we would just say, no, God effectively, in the case of Abraham, God appears at points to him and gives him direct things. Like nobody was questioning, oh, was God saying this right now? I can't really tell. Like, no, God's very clear in this case. So to speak of it as just of God just as a voice is really disingenuous.
Yeah. Well,
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was about to say, it's like, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I think that another thing, it's obviously that oversimplification, which it's a meme. So like you can't fault too much because that's how memes work. But like an important piece of context here, it's not just that Abraham heard voices in his head and that's why he did it. He heard voices basically saying, hey, you need to leave this city because I'm going to destroy it. And then that city got leveled. Like, it's kind of like Joan of Arc who, heard voices. It's like, yeah, it's not that she heard voices that was the significant part. It was that the voices were correct consistently and predictably. And it's just like, yeah, I don't know.
It's like, it's so weird. It's either you take all of the history or take none of it. You can't take half of it, like in the Bible. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I was going to make a similar point to Kyle, where it's just like this voice in, it from the heavens told him that his, 90-something-year-old wife was going to conceive a child, and then she did. And so when the voice can work miracles, it's probably a little bit more reliable than, the voices that I hear frequently in my head. But I think that the other person, the other thing I would note about the story of Abraham is I'm convinced that Abraham and Isaac probably knew that like something was going on here, because when they're going up to the hill for the sacrifice, and Isaac asks Abraham like, "Hey, where's the ram for the sacrifice?" He says, "Well, God will provide." There's this implicit trust that like like this is for the best if it's what God wants me to do. And so it's not even so much like I think that there is not just this trust that like okay, if this is what God wants for me, it's truly what's best, but also this trust that like maybe God isn't actually going to take my son away when he went to such great lengths to give him to me in the first place.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna go and add one more to the party. We have Lex Lalundi from Twitter and other places that I don't know if he wants me sharing where he's from.
Oh, you're welcome to share the fact that I'm from Cross the Tiber. I'm always proud of Cross the Tiber.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, we have now officially tied your account to Cross the Tiber. Hopefully we don't get shut down in the next week.
Yeah, that's not likely. Well, I want to jump right into this conversation and just kind of point out that the age in this exact story matters a whole lot. A lot of images always depict Isaac as being like this like child, whereas even if you go into Jewish tradition, the image of Isaac is that he's in his 30s by the time this story happens. This is not like an early event in the family. Isaac is a grown man. Abraham is old and feeble. So the power dynamic is not just like, oh yeah, this guy who's going up to murder his child. No, it's this frail old man is relying on his full-grown son to get him up the mountain. That's part of the dynamic that goes into this story that frequently gets left out in a lot of these images. So it's much more rich than they give it credit.
Yeah.
That's a lot older than I thought. I thought he was more like a young adult, like just fully matured. I
remember hearing 17.
I thought it was just like he was a fully grown man. I didn't know he was that old, but also I like that because it kind of adds to like his age is how strong he was, and like he's now like a man's man, like adding to the fact like, hey, God's asking you to sacrifice your best, not just your only, but your best. Like this is like some big guy too.
Oh, here we go. We've got an edgy guy in the chat here. So, how do you think Isaac felt on the way home?
I think that's the point, is that Isaac like knew what was going on. Like Isaac could easily have overpowered his father if he had a problem with what was going on.
Yeah.
So I think Isaac was on the exact same page.
Yeah.
That's what I learned too.
Yeah. It's, I don't know, like that's one of those that this is something that bugs me about a lot of like these atheist polemics, is that you have somebody who has what you would say the equivalent of like a third grade catechism, maybe less, read scripture and then think that they noticed something that nobody in the past 3,000 years who had the book of Genesis, they noticed something that nobody else has noticed, or that they're the only ones intellectually honest enough to admit it in the span of 3,000 years. And it's just like, okay, is that more likely, or is it that you perhaps there's something deeper here that you're not catching because this thing is so ancient, it is so old? Maybe there's some context here that isn't so readily available to our 21st century sensibilities. So, yeah.
third graders I taught today, I think they're a little bit more smarter than some of these guys. So
Well,
But I
catech-
literally teach
catech-
children for a living. So let me tell you,
same.
they're way smarter than people give them credit.
It's so true, and they're more open too. They're like, "Oh, okay, yeah."
All right. So let's get the next one loaded up, just so we can keep this moving along. Because Internet Atheist or Atheist Takes, your page is an absolute goldmine. Actually, Danny
So
pulled
good.
this one.
Yeah, dude.
Pulled this
Dude,
one
I
from
was
your
going through
page.
that the other day. It's so good. It's so good.
So
Yeah.
please tell me what the draw for heaven is again. It's literally just clouds. I miss food again, or something again. I don't know. Meanwhile, hell's a giant. None of
Like party.
a giant party. Yeah, none of my exes are. All my friends are here. All my pets are here too, which I think is a base take that all your pets are going to hell.
No.
Oh no.
Best party
that's
ever.
taking Thomism
Satan.
just a little far. Like,
Yeah, it's just like, no, not only will your dog not be in heaven, your dog is going to hell.
My
So
frog over there needs to stay alive, man. He needs to stay alive. Little Joe.
He
come on,
won't.
man.
But yeah, I think this is one of those. For some reason, us humans, we always seem to desire hell, even without this. Oh, it's going to be a giant party, because we seem to just always be yearning for it for nothing. So, but like also, heaven there seems a little hellish, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Oh, he did. Oh, sorry. He did the meme. 12 years of Catholic school.
He did it.
Oh, he did the meme.
That's so wonderful. Actually, that's perfect. I wish I could have been one of your grade school teachers, because this is what I do for a living. And literally, I'm not making this up. This week in class, what is our core subject? Men, what's heaven like? What's hell? What's purgatory? What are all these things? And so we were diving into all these examples of what does Scripture say heaven's like, and it so often describes it as being the wedding feast of the Lamb. And I have to explain to literal children, but also online, the equivalent of children, that Scripture's talking about this wedding banquet, and we don't do weddings like they used to. Like, we think our wedding receptions are wild and crazy and whatever, but they didn't last for days at a time. Back then they did. You go to a wedding for days. You're celebrating and partying with a family and joy, with dances and drinks and foods and feasts for days. And Jesus tells us and describes it for us as that's heaven, is this eternal wedding feast where we are with a family coming together, celebrating for eternity. It's just, and it goes, and then, I mean, there are also all types of descriptions. He calls it like living in a palace with God. I mean, there are all types of descriptions, but it's just one of those. No, it's you describe hell as a party. No, hell is not a party. Hell is eternal isolation and the deprivation of everything that's been everything good. Heaven is the fulfillment of every desire, every human desire, and it's described even by Scripture as like an eternal party with God. I'll take that, thanks. It's not just clouds. You're not without food. New heaven, new earth. I'm sorry, we get our bodies again. You don't know what you're talking about. And if you went to 12 years of Catholic school and you haven't heard of what the final judgment is and the resurrection of the body, the creed that you said at every mass that you went to in those 12 years, then you weren't paying attention. I'm sorry that was lost on you.
Yeah, I it sounds like, okay, so the description here is, minus this one here that I'm not going to read. But the description here, that actually is kind of the description of heaven, minus the pets. But yeah, anyways, sorry. But yeah.
Like, heaven in our pop culture has totally been so misrepresented. It's just like a plane. It's just white. But it was such a palate cleanser, and it was so impactful when I was watching a video on Dante's Paradiso, and it was just showing this, like the illustrations that go along with it. And it was like the the rose and like the entire circle that just goes into the middle where God is, and it was just so beautiful. I'm like, dude, I would rather want to be in part of that than have like my head stuck in the ground for like eternity. So, yeah.
Yeah, read
Yeah.
So great.
Dante's Inferno, and you can see, you know, I obviously nobody takes Dante to be completely.
Oh yeah, but
Well, unless you're like turbo
it speaks to
based,
the
if you want
truth
to say
though. I
Dante.
like the depiction.
No, it does
It's
speak
great.
to the truth. But the point is, like, I think Dante has a good vision of hell, even though, and heaven for that matter, even though we wouldn't say like, oh yeah, Dante truly saw it, and this is like something you have to believe or something. But his images of people, like, I think it's the people with lust. They're like blown around constantly through the wind, never close to each other, something like that, where their sins are what, you know, they correlate to the punishments. And these punishments are quite brutal. And then you look at heaven, and it's things like the reconciliation of the Dominicans and the Franciscans. Dante also has a great impression of Thomas Aquinas in there, which I love. But point is, like, usually the people that post these things have never actually read any legitimately good fiction or nonfiction theological works. So
Yeah, inspired my comic I'm making on purgatory, but yeah.
We can plug our works at the end here, but for now, we need to address this one. This is okay. So on a real note, you know, sometimes the opposition does have some good arguments, and they do require a lot of time and nuance to like suss out. So, you know, for those of you with weak constitutions, now might be a good time to click off. So, and here we are. There are no white people in the Bible. Take all the time you need with this.
Wow.
Davide's just over there like, are you serious?
Sometimes I see posts that inspire me to feel something. This is not one of those times.
well, how does she reconcile that with the fact that we have Pharaoh who shows up on the, you know, the casino? That is what Pharaoh looks like in the Exodus. If you've seen the meme, there are white people.
Oh, on the history textbooks, man. It's
Yeah.
like the guy going like,
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy. It's Pharaoh was Ryan Gosling, if you know this.
That is true. That is true. Yeah,
Another
it's one
vampire
of those.
discovered.
If I were here at this protest or whatever, I would just go like, "Ma'am, what's your point?" Like, sure, I'll grant that. Like, yes, okay, that's fine. What's your point? Like, this one is something that like truly baffles me because I don't actually know what she's trying to get at. Except for maybe it's like at an art display where Jesus is depicted as white, which okay, but I don't know. Anybody have anything on this? 'Cause
I think that she's trying to respond to this imaginary notion she has in her head that, like, you know, Christianity and the Bible is, you know, a white supremacist book designed to like reinforce white supremacy. And so it's like a super own to say there were no white people in the Bible, as though that would be a huge problem for Christian theology because we're so white supremacist or whatever. But like, it's sort of like what you were saying, Kyle, like, you know, it doesn't actually matter whether or not there were like white people in the Bible, because like it doesn't make a difference for the story that's being told what the color of skin that the characters had. It also just sort of like raises the question of like who counts as, you know, white people. Like, do the Egyptians count as white? Do the Jews count as white? I mean, it like Jesus probably had like kind of Mediterranean olive skin. Like, you know, his skin was probably a little bit darker than mine. But it's like, what difference does that make? Like, I for instance, don't have a problem with like, you know, when the gospel was preached in Asia, Jesus was depicted as an Asian because his ethnicity is not really what's important, other than the fact that he was that he was Jewish and he came from the descendants of Israel in the royal line of David. And so it doesn't actually matter what he looked like.
Yeah. Well, you know, Jesus was born on the continent of Asia, so, you know, but
no,
yeah,
even then, it depends on where you draw the boundary.
Sure. Well, and on that topic, you kind of touched on something. I've seen this on Twitter a lot, where the white supremacy is like getting really rampant, and it's weird. But like, what is that? Because I've got an Italian friend who hangs out here in Steubenville, and he said, like, bro, Italians weren't even white until like 15 minutes ago.
Yeah.
So like who is it that defines this? Like,
Yeah.
Is it only Northern Europeans? Is it, can we at least exclude the Spaniards? It's, I don't know. Like,
No, you're stuck with them.
Yeah.
It's how you successfully become, really.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you've got an Italian on stream with you, and like I've been called ethnically ambiguous, whatever the heck that means. I mean, like,
well, Daniel, you're Italian too, right?
Yeah, my last name Piselli. It means peas in Italian.
Wow. Well,
It's okay.
It's only on my dad's side. My mom whitewashed me, man.
I do
It's
have to wonder
okay.
what protest was this? Like, I just have to know.
I know. It's just like, what is going on here? But you say like your last name means peas. That's fine though, because I used to work with a German guy, and his last name was Harn, Harn. So if you don't know any German, look that one up. So
Yeah, okay.
somebody knows German. Okay. Go ahead.
As regards that one, I will say, occasionally you will come across like the memes on Twitter, at least, where it's like says it's trying to argue in a definitive way that Scripture argues that Jesus is a white guy with like light eyes and blonde hair and all these types of things. And I'm like, okay, you are really latching on to the wrong things. But they'll try.
Yeah.
They'll try. And there are people who have an ideological reason for doing that. But honestly, they missed the point. And in general, I think a lot of these people are responding to the common depictions of Jesus in the West. I'm like, okay, well, just go look at any of the icons of Jesus in Africa or in Asia, and you'll discover all of a sudden, oh my goodness, they made Jesus look Japanese in Japan. How could this be? I'm like, it's because it's not the point.
Yeah.
Well, the Basilica of the Immaculate Conception in DC, that blonde Jesus kind of gave me a bit of a spook. I'll be honest with you.
Jesus.
oh, the angry Jesus.
When I went there,
Yeah.
I was like, dang. I mean, I love
Something
it.
funny
I
is
love it.
I was just gonna say, I mean, I know this is somewhat of a debate, but it's actually kind of funny because my understanding is that when I read the scriptures, especially Isaiah, I think it's Isaiah 53, where it effectively says that Jesus has nothing of physical beauty in him. And I think John Chrysostom just explicitly said, yeah, Jesus wasn't good looking. And so the reason I say that is because Christians are generally told, like, hey, don't worry about, like, you're not supposed to think about the exact way that Jesus looked in this life and that he was supposed to be some paragon of physical beauty, prior to the transfiguration and his ascension. That's just not something we focus on. If a good Christian attitude would be basically, you look at if Jesus is some like 5'1" guy with like short hair and a bunch of acne, like that doesn't change what we think of him at all.
Yeah. It's because I'm an artist. It's like, how much do you love this person? When I draw someone, I want to draw them like very flattering and stuff. So that's how it really just bleeds through. Like, oh, I love Jesus so much, and I don't want to, make him look like just some schmo, Yeah.
And that's fair. I have nothing.
Yeah.
I'm not saying
Well,
that's moral
I
or
agree.
something.
I agree with you too. He just looked like a guy. He says that in the Bible. I'm just saying, like, yeah. Though that's what I just think about sometimes. I'm like, am I gonna make Jesus look like a Giga Chad today? But
That
guys
explains
seen that-
so much about your drawing of Alan Harrelson. But anyway,
You guys have seen that like Korean statue of Jesus where he's absolutely ripped, right?
They tore it down,
Yeah.
I heard.
Did they tore it down?
they tore it
Oh, that's a
down?
shame.
That sucks.
We got the memes out of it. That's the important
yeah.
thing.
I mean,
Hold
that's
on,
what I'm in for.
I have to share with you this drawing that Daniel did
Oh,
of
boy.
Alan Harrelson. See
I
if I
was
can
paying
do this.
attention. I promise. I was paying attention. That's how I pay attention. I just drop you.
I don't think I can do it without showing you my text message history with him, which I'm not going to do. Okay. Anyway,
You could probably
So-
screenshot it again and then. But don't do that.
that sounds like so much work. Okay,
It's
you guys
true,
continue
yeah,
the
no.
conversation. I'll do that.
You know what's
You-
really
you
funny
can crop
about
a screenshot. Yeah.
You know what's really funny about that poster is like, she must be a liberal. So just show her the Bible and like a person of color is talking, listen and learn. You know.
Ooh.
Yeah. It's true. That's really
Ooh, there we
based right
go.
there.
Oh well, yeah, that poster, that image though, it just immediately calls to mind that meme of like the crowd of people talking, and then like one person yelling at them from the side, and they just turn, give them big thumbs up, and then go back to talking. Like that's just the vibe.
Oh
I
yeah,
get.
yeah, yeah. I love that meme.
Oh,
So, Dr. Alan Harrelson, who runs the Pipe Cottage, an amazing man. He was our keynote speaker at the Catholic Creator Conference here in Steubenville this year. And this guy, Daniel Pacelli, was sitting in the front row drawing this while he was talking. So, whenever I texted this to Alan, I was just like, hey, you've already got fan art. And he was like, what? I don't understand. So, but anyway,
dude,
anyway,
thanks for sending him that, dude. That's awesome.
yeah. So you can go check out his channel at the Pipe Cottage. He had, and he's actually been on Pints with Aquinas before. His interview on Pints with Aquinas is just a joy to listen to because Alan talks with a very deep Southern accent. Like best way to describe it is that he talks like Foghorn Leghorn, and he's a yeah.
Boy,
He's and then Matt and his Australian accent. It's really fun. Anyway, moving on. Here we go. Being Catholic is about you and your sister having total meltdowns every Sunday morning because you're forced to get up at dawn to go to church where you can't even fall asleep because they keep making you stand and kneel and stand and kneel. To which I think this was Rob Blyton of Avoiding Babylon pointed out that this is stolen valor because if you're on Twitter, aged 40 specifically, you are not old enough to have ever gone to a 6 a.m. mass. So, like, so I don't know if anybody
I
wants to
don't
speak
have
on
any
this.
sisters.
I went the opposite direction from you, Kyle, because I said this person is definitely 5 years old.
Yeah. I mean, there's not a lot of substance here. It's just kind of like, okay, it's an exaggeration. It's kind of funny. But yeah, if anybody want to add anything on that.
It's not traumatizing to get up early. Like, if that's really how you define trauma, you're just a big loser.
I'm so sorry that your entire family got together every weekend and went and did an event together. I'm so sorry. You know how many people in the world wish that they didn't have to do that, and how there's no one in the world that's a little bit jealous that they had a family to get together with every weekend to do a family event, which probably following that event was something like, a meal together. Nobody would ever wish that. So I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
You can also just like nap later in the day. Like, it's not, it's not
For real.
I mean, okay, maybe not everybody, but like, hey, sometimes I got to get up early, to go to church, or I have like, or just some other event that I have to get up early and go. If I have time when I come home, I'll take a nap. But usually if I can't do that, I can also just power through. Like, that's just kind of being an adult. Tell that to people who have young children.
Being a kid, I teach over 100 and I teach about 150 kids. They all wake up at about 6 a.m. every single day. What are you talking about? This is what they do.
Yeah, I was about to say, I have 5 children, and waking up early is their specialty. We cannot sleep in at the Whittington house because after a certain time, the kids are up and we're up. So yeah, But anyway, let's move on to. I think we're gonna do this next one and then one more, and we'll probably go ahead and wrap it up. So here we go. This one's actually fairly substantive and actually, requires and like without a meme. So this is from Pelagia. Although when you go and read the replies to this, it was funny because like the top reply was, "Bet you thought you did something real clever there." So anyway, everything that begins to exist has a cause. Your religion began to exist. Therefore, your religion has a cause. All religions, except yours, had a human cause. Except yours is special pleading. Either your religion had a human cause or special pleading. I do not understand the point behind this.
He's confusing the order of being and the order of knowing, it seems. And well, I think the way that, like, to make it a stronger argument or to make it like a more tenable one would kind of be something like, and I mean, this kind of strays far from it, but it would be something like, well, the true religion we would expect to be found so early and all these things, like it doesn't change at all. We have no development, but it seems that Christianity begins at some point in time. And so it had a cause that I don't even know. I'm trying to be nice to him, but I can't think of anything really.
See, Kyle, with this one, you got my hopes up, because for the first 4 lines, you have like valid logical premises and conclusions, and then it goes completely off the rails, and it's just like, it's special pleading. And like, if I looked back into my notes from my logic class, I could tell you exactly what fallacy exists in the last 3 premises, but I'm not going to go through that much work. But like, this was very upsetting to read.
I don't know. I kind of look at it like the immediate analogy. It's not perfect because no analogy is, but the immediate analogy that comes to mind is something like gravity. Gravity does have an objective cause, and that cause is mass existing. Fair. But if we're approaching it from an idea of religion being a way of understanding things, religion is just a way of understanding things. Science is just a way of understanding things. Gravity has no dependence on our ability to understand it. Religion shouldn't have any like relation to whether or not we know it to be true. My point here being, the truth was the truth, independent of the way we came to know it. Gravity was real before we started figuring out how to map it out. Religion, the truth of God, was true before we started trying to define it. That's not a human cause. Gravity doesn't have a human cause. The true religion doesn't have a human cause. Leave aside the hypostatic union for a second. So it doesn't map out that way. Like there's a disconnect. The way things are is not dependent on how we come to understand it. Truth is truth. And that's what this meme doesn't get, is that it's either true or it's false. And that doesn't have anything to do with whether or not we've defined it and studied it and explained it.
Yeah. Lori's got a pretty good question here. So she's asking, what exactly does special pleading mean? Does somebody want to unpack that?
Special pleading, as I understand it, is effectively when somebody makes an argument, or when you make an argument and you reach a conclusion and somebody says, well, you have to extend that to something else. And you say, without any justification, that you do not have to extend it there. So a good example of this would be, and bringing it within the realm of philosophy of religion, if someone were to say, everything, like if this were the argument, premise 1, everything has a cause. Premise 2, God is a cause. Premise 3, God could have caused the universe or something. And you go, okay, well, God could have a cause. You're like, nope. Like, well, why? You're like, he just couldn't. Well, by your first premise there, it should extend to God and say that God could possibly have a cause or something like that. So that's what special pleading is. Is there a more succinct way to say it than I did? I think I covered it fairly well, but maybe I'm not being as intelligible as I think I am.
At the base level, it's a double standard.
Yeah.
At the base level, it's a double standard. You're saying, and like religious wise, it'd be like, let's say 2 religions are claiming miracles. If we're claiming miracles to support us and then dismissing miracles as mere coincidence or interpretations and other ones, that'd be special pleading. We're saying it counts for us because we say so, but not for them. But it's essentially it's a double standard. You're not being consistent.
Yeah, he's assuming his conclusion and his premise. He's begging the question because he is presupposing in his assertion that except yours is special pleading, in that he is implicitly accepting the belief that Jesus Christ was not God. Because if Jesus Christ was God, then our religion has a divine cause, not a human cause. And therefore, it would not, the except yours would not constitute special pleading.
Well,
All right. Yeah.
it
It
seems
looks
to
like,
have answered it.
yeah, Lori's got it. So good job, guys. Okay. So here's the final one that is, I think it should be dealt with all the seriousness that it deserves, which is to say, none at all. So here we
There
go.
you are.
This is the future the left wants, and this is
Oh
the future the right wants.
Wow.
I mean, yeah. I mean, what's wrong with the bottom panel?
Wait, I thought we were still on YouTube, not locals right now.
Oh, yeah.
You know what's funny about it is if you actually watch. What's funny is because I've watched a good amount of Star Trek. Maybe you can call me cringe for that, but like if you watch Star Trek, what you'll find is that there's like a lot of awful stuff that happens in there. And even though you could say, oh, there are no, I mean, you have like unlimited resources theoretically. There's a lot of stuff that just sucks. Like Deep Space Nine has the Dominion. TNG has the Borg. Like there are a lot of people that live in effectively poverty there. There's like in Deep Space Nine, there's effectively space, tyranny with the how the Bajorans are treated, all this stuff. So no, it's not perfect as they'd say. And a point of Deep Space Nine and some of Next Generation is that now the Federation actually sucks in some ways. So yeah, they haven't actually watched the top show, it seems.
Yeah. Well, and like, okay, we want to live in Star Trek. Okay. That's science fiction, buddy. Like, it's just like life is never going to get to that point in your lifetime. So what are you doing?
No,
Like-
well, you are clearly opposed to Elon Musk, but okay.
Thank you, Sheldon Cooper, for your post.
Yeah.
I'm also
So-
going to point out that like both of these shows are set at different times in the future, where Star Trek is set much later than The Handmaid's Tale, and so there's actually nothing stopping both of these from being true in the future.
I mean, well, frankly, if you really want to be super nerdy about it, the Star Trek
You gonna bring up
universe.
the eugenics wars?
Well, what I was going to point out is just that the Star
Oh,
Trek
no.
world would entirely be okay with letting the Handmaid Tale world exist. Their job is not to interfere, so they would look at it and go, "Yep, that's how they do things. That's fine." So, like, it's a very bizarre analogy to make. Which, I mean, granted, it's coming from probably a post made by someone who isn't a nerd and has like passing knowledge of the two. But it's like the Star Trek universe would allow for both of those universes to exist at the same time. In fact, that would be their duty. So it's just bizarre.
There's an
Nick
episode in
Highlander.
Deep Space Nine. Well, it's a big theme in Deep Space Nine for Captain Sisko to be the emissary of the prophets, and there's like an entire episode dedicated to them being really skeptical, and then the prophets being proven right on something, like something really significant that they could not have just guessed on. So, yeah.
Oh, can't guess. I can't make out what the bottom picture is. Bottom picture is an image from a story called The Handmaid's Tale, which, to do a brutal oversimplification, is basically just like this world where women are property. And they use that image all the time as like this straw man of anybody who has the slightest conservative leaning possible wants to just deprive women of all rights possible and treat them like property and treat them like, I don't know, like breeding factories, basically. And that's not, I mean, it's a ridiculous straw man, but it's a scaremongering tactic that they use all the time. So
Father John Brown is in the chat saying that AI tells him that he looks like William Riker, so that's fun. And honestly, I can see it. Okay,
Yeah,
it's the
for
beard.
sure.
So, but yeah.
I went to a march it's of the men's march in Boston, and it was like men like praying the rosary, marching from like Planned Parenthood in Boston to the Capitol, and there's like in the front some girl dressed up as a woman from The Handmaid's Tale, and the look on their faces, like there's a clown parade clowning on us, playing like in a band next to us, and then there's this girl, and the look on their faces, once we were greeted by all the women at the Capitol, they're like, "Thank you so much for doing this for us, like for actually being supportive and there for us." They're like, "Dang, oh, ooh, ooh." Yeah, it was funny.
That's why they have to talk
Yeah.
about internalized misogyny. It's so funny that they'll talk about, believe women until women disagree with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
The girl that
Well,
was in the costume, I did not see her ever again.
For me, one of the
Nice.
most annoying things about The Handmaid's Tale is the fact that it's supposed to be an explicitly like Catholic dystopia, but clearly like the author does not understand any of the distinctions of various Christian denominations, and so just paints it as a vaguely like evangelical religious dystopia, which is honestly like I'm really disappointed because like the Catholic Church has various like authority structures and things that could have made the world building actually a lot more interesting, like sort of like seeing how does the dystopian government interact with the conference of bishops, or how do they interact with the Pope in Rome, and how do you balance all of those different power interests. But they just don't want to explore that, and it's disappointing, obviously, from a religious perspective that the straw man is out there. But it's also just disappointing from a narrative perspective that like those opportunities for like actual complexity and an interesting like dynamic was just completely missed out on.
Yeah, to the secularist, all I ever see is like the super Christianity is just Catholicism, which is actually kind of like cool. But like they make every like if a bad thing happened and there were Christians, they had to be Catholics, which is so
Which
strange.
is so strange. That's so
Yeah.
weird. Like, well, it's there was that meme that's like there's that meme that's like, if you haven't, what is it? If you own a Bible and don't read it, you're Catholic. If you read the Bible selectively, you're evangelical. If you read it thoroughly and analyze it, you're an atheist. It's like I just have found honestly the opposite in many cases. So it's just such an oversimplification. Also, 99% of the time an atheist says something like, "Oh, I've read the entire Bible," it's like they were just skimming it and they didn't understand like a single page of it.
Yeah.
Well, they know what Bible to buy now.
Yeah.
I know that anytime I run into one of those people who like tries to cite the Bible as like saying, "Hey, look at this story that's like it's a biblically induced abortion." I'm like, "Oh my goodness, you have never taken a Hebrew class in your life, have you?" I can tell, because that's not at all what that's about.
All right. Well, cool. Well, that is just about all the time that we have tonight. We're running up on an hour and a half, but I just wanted to give the last couple minutes just to give everybody the opportunity to just kind of tell what you've got going on, and where can they find you, and plug your socials and any projects that you got going on. So, Atheist Takes, why don't you go first?
Yeah. So I am available on X as, let me look at my exact want to make sure, as just at Atheist Takes. That is Atheist, and then Takes are, I don't have only one T, I have two. So it's Atheist Takes. I'm going to be continuing to post the kind of content that you saw here tonight. And if you find anything online, you see anything you think is funny and you think is worth posting, DM me. I give credit, and I would love to post it.
Yeah, and I do have your social linked in the description, and the description is going to be the best way. So you're linked in the description. So
perfect.
Davide, why don't you tell us what you've got going on? Where can people find you?
Yeah, sure. So sorry, my camera's not working. I can't figure out what's going on, but I have a YouTube channel and podcast called the Doctrine, Dogma, and Davide Podcast. And I cover just like aspects of theology as well as apologetics. I really just mainly cover topics that I find interesting, things that, questions that maybe I have that I want to investigate or that people ask me. My next upcoming video is on the history and development of the rosary, with an eye towards discerning whether or not it's wise to use the luminous mysteries when we pray the rosary. So look out for that. But thank you so much for having me on stream.
All right, Lex, tell us about yourself. Where can people find you? What do you have going on?
So, I'm a school teacher. You can find me on Twitter at Lex_Ladendi, the law of gaming. I spend most of my time doing a mix of actually explaining aspects about the faith, usually trying to explain them not high above the level that I would teach my kids, that I actually teach as a teacher, But you can also, if you have anybody who is not Catholic and is interested in learning more about Catholicism, you can send them over to Cross the Tiber, an apostolate I work with, which is all about teaching people who don't know anything about Catholicism. It's entirely online, and we're founded at almost everybody on the team, except for me, is a convert themselves. So they have their own stories, their own backgrounds. They understand all the nuances of all these things that I don't get. And so we have a great team that can really help people in a online but separate place to kind of come to know what the faith is about, express their questions and their concerns, and be supported every step along the way by people who get exactly where they're coming from. And those are the two places you can find me.
Yeah, and I am part of that team on Cross the Tiber. So if you want to come talk to me, want to learn about the Catholic faith, feel free to join in. And you can talk to both me and Lex, and you could even find out what his real first name is if you can put two and two together.
It's true.
All right, Daniel, what about you? Who are you? Where can people find you? What do you have going on?
All right. I have a few things going on. So I run a YouTube channel called Faithful Amphibian. It's to spotlight the youth in the church, share their testimonies, share their stories, get other youth in the church to kind of just relate and see like, hey, wait, this is so similar to me, like my story. So, and I help lead them to rely on God, fully relying on God. And you get the acronym FROG from that, which is honestly pretty sick. That's where the Faithful Amphibian comes in. And then I have my own art YouTube channel, just same name, Daniel Pacelli. I just make art videos, Catholic art videos. I only have one up, but I am working on two. One of doing some linoleum printings on some shirts, and another about how generative AI is immoral. And yeah, and then if you want to follow me, you Faithful Amphibian on Instagram, and djpacelli.art on Instagram if you want to follow some of my art. DJPISELLI.art.
All right. Awesome. Well, everybody, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining this. This was a blast. Hopefully somebody learned a couple of things, or maybe, sparked your interest, and, invite you to dive deeper on this. Maybe you disagree. Let me know about it in the comments. If you're not subscribed, please do. On November 14th, the big thing we've got coming up on the channel is I'm going to be hosting a debate between Redeemed Zoomer and Braden Cook, the catechumen, over if ecumenical councils are fallible or not. So tune in. It will be Redeemed Zoomer's last foray into Catholic Protestant apologetics, because I got him to agree to that debate the day before he announced that he was getting out of it. So that was quite the thing. But anyway,
clutch on your end, man.
Yeah. So anyway, so to Redeemed Zoomer's credit, he is a man of his word, and he is sticking to it. So so on that note, thank you all who have stuck around, made it this far, especially you 13 who are currently watching live. And yeah, so thank you so much, and thanks for watching, and God bless.